I'm just going to right off the bat say that this is possibly one of my favorite movies now. I will put it down as one of my favorites.
Welcome back, everybody. I am Maria.
And I am Channice.
And this is our podcast, Cinema Chicks.
I just want to remind you guys at this point to subscribe to our channel, like our videos, leave a comment. We really appreciate every single comment, every little bit of feedback that we get.
Yes.
We love it and we thank you guys for it.
Yes, and I mean, feel free to also join the discussion down in the comments below as well. If there are points that you want to make for or against whatever we're saying, make them. We really want to see them.
We really do. So today we are going to be discussing the Netflix original film Pieces of a Woman. Channice, I'll let you tell everyone what the movie is about.
Right, so this movie, Pieces of a Woman, as Maria said, is a Netflix original movie that stars Vanessa Kirby and Shia LaBeouf as a young couple, Martha and Sean, who are awaiting the arrival of their child because Martha is pregnant. Martha organizes to have a home birth. The baby is born, they're all happy. But unfortunately, a couple minutes after the baby is born, it dies. And we're basically following her and Sean throughout the movie to kind of see the repercussions of what happened as a result of this child, unfortunately, passing away. Right.
Before we get into it, I just want to say right off the bat that I actually really loved this movie, and I think that every woman needs to watch the movie, especially young women. And the reason why I say this is because this is something that is not really talked about often, but it happens for a lot of women. In me saying that, I'm extending it not only to dying shortly after being born. I'm talking about stillborns. I'm talking about miscarriages. It's something that happens to a lot of women. And the show depicts the reality. It is just so real at how they're showing the emotional turmoil that you go through as an individual, as a woman, and the emotional turmoil that you go through in your relationship. It really makes you feel the emotions that you would go through and how it impacts you going forward. So I really loved it for that reason.
I would agree with you, Maria, for sure. I 100% agree that every girl should watch this movie. Mm-hmm. This movie, I'm just going to right off the bat say that this is possibly one of my favorite movies now. Wow. I will put it down as one of my favorites. This movie is going to last forever.
Oh, really?
It's so real. It is so real in its depiction of just every emotion.
Yes.
To me, it was almost like I told my brother that it felt like I was in literature class again. It was art just unfolding in front of me.
Yeah.
The way how they made you feel everything. They connected every single scene, everything. It was amazing. I loved the writing. I loved the acting. I loved everything about it.
And I think why we were able to feel it so much is not even the words that were coming from the actors or the script. It was looking on their faces. There was actually very little communication between the characters.
That's
at some
what
point.
I said.
And you, even without verbal communication, you were able to understand every single thing that was happening and feel every single emotion.
The acting was superb.
It was beautiful.
It was so amazing.
I don't think they could have had a better cast.
I just felt like everything, the writing, the scene, the setup, the plot, everything about this movie. There's nothing that I can complain about, honestly.
Yeah, honestly.
But let's get into the movie.
Right. So we can start with it's not the very first scene, but obviously the first memorable scene that you just can't get out of your head is the scene where she's in labor.
The labor scene.
And the scene where she is birthing her child. As Shani said earlier, it was a home birth.
Yes. I was watching it with my boyfriend, and he was so uncomfortable. But I was sitting there and I was saying, boy, you better watch. Because this is how it looked so real. It looked like she was actually pushing a child out. The veins in her neck stood up, the way she wrenched her body in positions. You're like, wow, how is she doing that so well?
It was just an amazing depiction of giving birth.
Yeah.
Persons probably feel uncomfortable like seeing something like that, but I thought it was beautiful watching it.
I thought it was beautiful as well.
I don't know if I'm just weird.
I did. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
I was engrossed, and I feel like it's important to point out that at that point in the movie, her, Martha, and Sean were so in love.
And so connected.
So connected.
Yeah.
You could see the love in how he supported her through that labor, him walk her through everything. He was there. If she needed anything, he ran to get it, and it was
beautiful. That's all I can say. I can't, honestly, I don't know what else to say about it. It was just beautiful, that whole scene.
But her doula was not available when her water broke. And so Sean called the doula, who basically put him on to someone else. Mm-hmm. And so this person came just impromptu and was just improving. She never knew anything of her pre-existing conditions, of what she had planned before. She was just coming in fresh, and she was just trying to help them out as best as she could.
Right.
She takes the heartbeat of the baby, which is fine. It looks like it's gonna be a good birth, and everything is going well. She tells the mother to go in the bath. Sean is there holding her hand, supporting her the whole time. When she gets up out of the bath, we see blood drop into the bath. Yeah. She turns to the doula and she says, "Is that normal?" Doula is like, "Yeah, that's normal. It's not abnormal to have spotting." She says she feels like she's gonna throw up. The doula says, "That's normal. Fine." She goes into the room, onto the bed. When the doula takes the baby's heartbeat, checks the baby's heartbeat again, she finds that the baby's in distress. And this is the heightened part of the show. This is when everything starts to, we're still in the beginning scene, but it starts to get a little intense at that point, because everything seemed so good before. The pace was very slow until we got to that point when the baby was in distress. Then she starts telling her to push. When a baby goes into distress, it's a situation where it's basically like your contractions are lasting for so long that your baby can't catch a breath. Okay. But she births the baby, as we said, and the baby comes out and cries, and everything seems normal.
Well, before we get there, the doula did tell her
that
or her husband
that
she might have to go to the hospital because she realized that the heartbeat was not steady. She had her heart set on having a home birth, and I don't think she realized how serious it was, because I think the doula was trying to comfort her at the same time, and so she said she wanted to stay. But the husband did call the ambulance after a while, because the doula said, "I think you need to do this now." Yes. And when you looked at the doula's face, so I'm going back now to when the ambulance is called, she continues to push, and the child is born. She cries. Channice got us to this point. But when you looked on the doula's face, as soon as the child was born, she was in so much relief.
Right.
Because in a way, it looked like she wasn't sure if they were gonna get there. Yeah. Like she knew that something was seriously wrong, And so she was so relieved. You could see it on her face. She actually took a long, like a sigh of relief.
Yes, and she sat down and
she wiped her forehead and like she did it. Like thank God that this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the camera is still on the doula,
but in the background,
and you can see the parents in the background,
and they're
holding
taking
the
pictures.
baby, taking pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the change in the mood completely by just looking on the doula's face, because it's like she just stops. I don't know if she stopped hearing the baby crying, but she just turns around ever so slightly, runs over to the baby, and is trying to, I don't know, put back life. I don't know how else to explain it into this child, because the child
was turning
blue. And is dying in the mother's arms, and this is just moments after she was born.
Birthed, right? So that was that set the stage for the whole movie.
The rest of the movie is based on that very moment. What happens next?
Martha is in the supermarket and she's just browsing, and one of her mother's friends come over to her and start basically tell her that your mother tells me everything, like how are you feeling, so on, basically grilling her about how she feels about losing her child. Obviously, after you've lost a child, this is the conversation you don't want to have with anyone. But I feel like they put this in there to kind of give you the perspective of what usually happens, what typically happens to a woman after she's had a miscarriage or lost a child, and there's going to be the instance where someone comes up to you and
questions you
without any tact at all, just starts asking you about the child that you just lost.
I agree with you completely.
Another major scene that I wanted to talk about was the train scene, where she's in a train and there are children on the train, and she has an apple in her hand and she's basically just sniffing the apple and she's looking at the children. And I feel like they included this scene because they wanted to show you like the pain that you feel as a woman when it's just the different aspects, literally the pieces of a woman.
Everything was put in there so purposefully, and perfectly. I would say, everything had meaning.
Every single thing.
Oh gosh,
every single thing. Another scene is when they were doing the gravestone. She had made up her mind that she wanted the body to be donated to the university. But her family wanted to have a whole funeral. The body was still going to be donated to the university. Here is another major scene that I felt like was very important, because they're engraving the name in the gravestone and they spelled the name wrong. Because in her head, her child's name, they named her Yvette. It was a girl and they named her Yvette. And I can't remember if she wanted it to be spelled Yvette or
Evette
or Ivet.
Either way, they spelled it incorrectly, and I believe it was because Sean, her husband or partner, whichever it was, had given them that spelling.
Right.
She was so hurt.
She was so hurt.
Because it's like you're holding on to the little things.
Yes.
You know, if the child was actually born and grown and somebody spelled their name wrong when they're a little bit older, you probably wouldn't think too much of it.
Right.
But this is like the only thing you have to hold on to for the child's name and the spelling of the name, how important that is and how special it is to you. And for someone to not realize how important and special that is, it took her out of it. She got a little bit
very upset about that.
And this is where we see for the first time kind of the divide.
The split, right.
The divide between her and Sean.
Yeah.
Woo!
Oh, this movie is so good. Alright. Sean was a recovered alcoholic.
I don't know if it was alcoholic. They didn't specify, but they just said that he was in sobriety. Mm-hmm. So they didn't say what his poison was.
But we see in the show, in this scene that I'm about to bring up, we see at that point where he's basically sneaking alcohol. So they're both in the house, and we can see that they're both hiding something from each other. She's hiding the apple, he's hiding the drink. He goes over to her and they're talking, and he expresses that he misses her. And in this expression, you understand that it's a sexual frustration that he's having in that moment. And he basically starts to kiss her, and it was a very graphic scene. They're trying to have sex, but she looks like she's not really into it the whole time. I feel like this is another major scene. Mm-hmm. After you've had a child inside you, push that child out, and I mean, now you're dealing with mourning the death of that child, feeling the way how, I don't know how women feel after they've given birth, but I imagine that it's not very pleasant.
But this by now is about a couple months after.
Right, but I don't feel like her libido was,
I don't think it's
there at all. I feel like she's so busy mourning the death of her child. I don't feel like she had gotten over the grief to where she could even think about having sex. But it's clear that, I mean, men are different, because I feel like men need that kind of stimulation.
Yeah, I think for him it would have been like a comforting thing for him, because he was also going through it.
He was,
which I want to discuss too. But I think it goes even further than just the fact that she wasn't done mourning and all of that. But maybe I'm overthinking it, because I tend to do that a lot. The whole reason why she got pregnant, how you get pregnant, is through sex.
Oh.
Imagine you're not over the fact that your child died, and you went through the long process of being pregnant and being hopeful and expecting this baby, all because you had sex. And sex led to the moment that put her in this depression.
Right.
You're about to go have sex again? I mean, it must be so difficult for somebody who has gone through a miscarriage or anything like that, for them to put themselves back into a situation to be ready to have sex again.
Yeah, I agree. I can't imagine. This scene and the scenes that preceded it shows how heavy the movie gets as we move along, and why you feel so much of the emotions, because it keeps on, it's layering on the different things that happen, and all those feelings.
This is just, I mean, I'm enjoying this, but I don't know if it's like heavy for persons.
Yeah.
But I think, you see, this is the first time you and I have been friends for over 10 years, and we've never had a conversation like this before.
I agree. That's because, I mean, neither of us have gotten pregnant, so we can't really relate on a topic that none of us can talk about.
I know, but it's like you hear about persons having miscarriages all the time, but you never really think about the effect and how it impacts them.
It really is very common. It's amazing how many women, if you talk to them, can tell you they've had at least one miscarriage.
Yeah.
So there's a scene. Martha's sister stops by the house because he sells the minivan. He gets desperate at one point. He's back on his addiction. He sell the minivan.
Well, before we get into that, because I kind of want to, I know where this is going, and I want to paint him in a different light before we get to that.
Okay,
because
let's go.
While Martha is going through all of these emotions, and while we feel for Martha, we're also feeling for Sean. And I loved that the movie didn't just show how it affected the woman. They showed how it affected the man as well, because it does affect men. He was struggling as well. He was crying. He was trying to make himself feel better by going back to his addictions, whatever they were, whether it was alcohol, cigarette smoking, sex. We even saw him sniffing cocaine at one point. I think he was trying to go through the emotions and feel what he was feeling with Martha. But Martha was not in a position to do that. She was trying to feel what she was feeling on her own, which is understandable. But it was so hard for him to do it by himself.
Yeah.
As a result of that, going to sleep with another woman, I guess. Her cousin. It was Martha's cousin.
Yeah.
And I guess he was doing that just to feel something again. I don't know.
Like that was it.
But it was hard for him as well.
It was definitely hard for him. His goal was just to go back to normal, whatever that was before this whole thing happened. But so the sister drops by. She sees Martha and tells her that she's dropping off her earrings because they sold the minivan, and that's what they found in there. So she was just returning it.
Yeah, actually, it was Sean sold the minivan without Martha's knowledge.
Right. And at that point in the movie, it was clear that Sean was cheating. But I don't feel like Martha ever addressed it.
We saw Martha after her sister reveals the secret by showing her an earring that was found in the car that's not hers. We see Martha then go out to like a club, it seems.
Yes.
And she's there dancing, and there's this
co-worker.
one guy. Oh, it was a co-worker? She kisses him. She goes home that evening. Sean is at home. Martha walks in, and he's saying to her that she's like a liar or something like that. Like basically cussing at her, using expletives as well. He's pissed.
I guess he was just upset with the fact that she wasn't at home. Like they basically aren't seeing each other. She wasn't at home. Him kind of maybe suspect something is happening. But in that scene too, I was very surprised when he took up the exercise ball and threw at her. But that scene for me was very, 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 very important, because this is where I feel like the literature book comes into play. Because he throws the exercise ball at her. She out the cigarette on the ball. The ball deflates. And we're just watching the ball deflate. Then the camera pans around the house, and we see where it looks like this house has not been kept in months.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a metaphor for their house, their relationship.
Yep.
The relationship has not been kept. Nobody is there to kind of water the flowers of the relationship then. There were dead flowers. There was dirt on flag. Nobody was there to clean up. And I was like, art. That's all I said, art.
It was.
So good. And another big point is when he was at the lawyer's office and they were talking about the bridge. I feel like the bridge was a major thing in the movie as well, where there's apparently a bridge that the middle of the bridge broke down, and they were talking about resonance and how one tiny thing can cause that big bridge to crack and break. And I thought that was a metaphor for their relationship. How the one incident, because before the baby was born and during the birth of the baby, we saw how loving they were, how much they loved each other.
Yep.
And that one incident just led to the breakdown of their relationship.
Yeah. The relationship between Martha and her mother.
Oh yes, I was going.
From the very beginning, we saw that Martha's mother was overbearing, even before the birth scene.
Yes,
it seemed like she had heavy control, or tried to have a lot of control over Martha and Sean's life. She was very involved, and she did a lot for them. She was the one who actually bought the car for them. After the baby dies, the mother wanted so badly to put blame on the doula for the fact that the baby died. And so she was pressuring Martha to sue this lady, bring her to court. What stood out to me is when Martha and her mother are in a kitchen. Martha is still dealing with her emotions. She's handling it in the way that she wants to handle it. But her mother looks at her and is telling her that she's sorry she raised her in the way that she did, and she should have raised her to be a stronger person. And saying that when she was a baby, the doctor that was there basically said she wasn't going to make it. The doctor then held her by her foot and held her upside down and said that if she lifts her head, then there's a chance.
Yeah, I remember that.
And she said to Martha that I lifted my head. And so she's trying to say that she's a strong woman, and that she wished that she had raised Martha to be just as strong. And at that moment I was thinking, what? How can you tell somebody who is going through, she's the one who experienced this, it is her baby, she's trying to deal with it in the best way she can, and you're going to look at her and tell her that she's not strong enough?
Yeah, I got tones of judgment from the mother as well. She was basically judging her too for the fact that she chose to have a home birth and not go to the hospital. And I felt like that's the least, like at this point in time, I feel like that's not a point that you should focus on.
You're still giving her hell about it and making her feel like her choices and her decision was wrong. And that's the last thing she needs to hear at all from anybody.
After the scene where she has that talk with Martha, she goes over to Sean and basically writes him a check and asks him to leave.
But by that time, their relationship was already depleted.
I feel like he really loved Martha still.
Yeah, he definitely still loved her, because even when they finally separated and she drove him to the airport, he was going to Seattle. He comes out of the vehicle. She doesn't even come out to give him a hug. She doesn't tell him bye, nothing. She just drove him there. There was no words. He comes out of the vehicle and is walking into the airport. And they don't show his face, but you're only seeing the back of him. But you know that he was bawling. And all you could hear him was like a sniffle. And then you just saw him like hold him head down. And so you knew at that moment that, it was done. And he was having a hard time with it.
Now, one of the biggest scenes in the movie is the court scene.
I didn't think it would get to that, right? Because we know that Sean was involved in starting the process, but I ultimately thought that it would be Martha's decision as to whether the trial would even commence, because she would be the main witness. The whole time she was against it. She never actually said, I do not want to do this, but you could tell that she was against it. And then when they first put her into the witness box and asked her the questions, she was answering like, yes, she believes that the doula it was her fault, and not in those words, but basically going along with the questions. And then they break. In the middle of her being cross-examined, she goes and she finds a picture from a store that wasn't printed as yet, sees the picture of her holding her baby, and at that point she goes back when court resumes and she just outrightly says, I don't believe the doula did this, which is what I thought she felt from the very beginning. So that scene to me felt a bit like it didn't match with how she was throughout the movie.
You mean the first instance? That never matched her. I feel like another reason why she never necessarily wanted to have the child was because she never wanted to relive that moment They were asking her questions that she couldn't even answer, because I don't really feel like she even considered those things when it was happening and after. So they were asking her if she never looked at her baby's fingers, and that I feel like in that moment she realized that she never looked at her baby's fingers. And that is why she went to the photo lab and asked them to print out the photos, because they were taking pictures at the time of the birth and they had never printed it. So she went back to the photo lab now to get negatives for those pictures, just so she could look at the baby, because I don't think she even remembered how the baby looked. She looked at it and she looked at the fingers and she came back, and then it's like she had a revelation. Yes, she remember now, but she doesn't think the lady was responsible for the death of her child. So after that scene, at the end of the movie, we see an apple tree. From I saw the apple tree because during the movie she had become obsessed with apples. Mm-hmm. Right, when she came back into the court too, she made the note that her baby smelled like apples.
Yes.
She said she remembered the smell of the head of the baby and it smelled like an apple. And the theme of the apple throughout the movie became clear to me at that point.
Yep.
Because she became obsessed with apples and she started to like germinate apple seeds and so on. Mm-hmm. At the end of the movie, when we see the apple tree, this big apple tree with a ton of apples, I'm going back to literature class and I'm like, oh look, this means she must have had a child. Then we see a little girl climbing the tree, and then we see Martha come out and call down her child. And
so
we see where she had a child afterwards.
All is well in the world.
All is well in the world. The apples have borne fruits.
Mm-hmm. And it was a good ending.
It was, because
throughout the whole show we were so drained of the emotion that she was feeling, which was necessary, but it was nice to see that even though you go through so much struggle, there is always light at the end of the tunnel.
I agree. It was refreshing. It was a refreshing end.
It was a nice end.
There was one thing I was curious about at the end, and that was, did Sean ever come back? Like,
we don't know. I was hoping to see who she was with as well, but we never got to see.
You never saw it.
So that is our review of the show. What would you rate it?
10 out of 10. 11 out of 10. It was so good.
10s across the board.
Across the board. It was really good. I was not disappointed. I would recommend anyone, even men, boys should watch this show too, not just girls. Boys, you go and you watch this show so you can really understand, because if we as girls think it's so rare to even have this conversation or hear about these things, I can't imagine boys.
Guys, as usual, if you made it to this part of the episode, comment apples.
Hey, agreed.
So thanks for listening, guys. Remember to leave a comment.
Join the conversation down below. Like the video, subscribe to us, and recommend us to your friends.
Bye, guys.
Bye. We'll see you next time.